Hi, my name's Sam McAdam and welcome to Air Chats with Air Max. In my day-to-day activity, I charter aircraft following strict compliance guidelines, doing a lot of due diligence and ensuring everything is above board. But there is, let's say, a darker side to aviation, and someone that's seen that and experienced that firsthand is our next guest. We welcome Matt Potter. Matt Potter, welcome to Air Chats with Air Max. Good to finally have you here.
Yeah, pleasure to be here as well.
How are you doing?
Really well, pretty excited because obviously being invited to talk about some of my favourite times, one of my favourite subjects. Yeah, very up for it today, I think you could say.
Okay, I'm glad you're here and I'm really excited to talk about this book, but not only this book. Obviously, if you look at your, let's just say your LinkedIn or your website, you don't just have a job title. You've got like a paragraph of job titles and things that you do. What's the main thing you're involved in, and then how does Matt Potter come to write a book? Are you a journalist?
Yeah,
or an author?
So there was a long time ago, and this is to answer the question. A long time ago, I met a bloke called Mark Bowden, and he was an American author, and I met him by accident. And I'm not a kind of person who's from a background who meets authors at all. I mean, neither of my parents had any finished school or have any exams or anything like that. But I met this bloke, and I said to him, he wrote Killing Pablo, the book about Pablo Escobar and how he was taken out. And I'd read the book because obviously being a teenager, I was like, oh, right, God, Pablo Escobar. And I said to him, Mark, there's so much in the book. There's so much knowledge and fact. How did you, and he went in an American accent, and he was wearing a big he had a white suit and a white fedora hat. And he said, Mr. Potter, journalism is the last great bastion and resort of the generalist. And I'm like, that's me. I can't necessarily just direct my energies in one thing. I'm a magpie. Mm-hmm. And I've got kind of quite heavy ADHD. So one of the things is, an interesting thing people haven't noticed. That's what I love to do. So everything in my career, whether it's the film writing in Hollywood, whether it's the kind of documentary stuff, the books, the journalism, the investigative or the other stuff, or writing for like the Washington Post and that, or whether it's brand work, anything else, is always driven by that. And by a quote, which I love, from a guy called Ben Goldacre, who writes the books on bad science. And he said, the most interesting and important words in the history of science are not eureka or anything like that. They are, that's weird, that shouldn't be happening. And so that's been my lifeblood. So when I see something that I think, that's odd, no one's seen that and that shouldn't be happening, I'm all over it. And so I think that explains my LinkedIn. But that also explains the kind of the fascination I've got for lifting the lid on things and just figuring out what's going on underneath and how that works. Sometimes it works for telly, sometimes it works for, skullduggery.
Yeah, well, you just listed them off there and I was like, I didn't even realise that you did film writing.
Oh, yeah. Again, I'm a magpie though, I'm nobody's, I write films, that's what I do. I'm like, a chance to write a film, that'd be brilliant and that'd be amazing. I'm a chatterbox, really, as you can probably tell, and so that gives
people, good for a podcast.
Yeah, no dead air here. Yeah. But that gives people. That means that when we're in situations, people hear something and go, "Really? Okay, let's talk a bit more about that." And it kind of makes you porous. So I'm a porous magpie. Is my actual job title probably?
Okay, that's good. and this guy that you met, sorry, remind me his name?
Mark Bowden.
Mark Bowden, because I'd now like to look at that book.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome book, actually.
When was that? What were you doing?
Oh, right. So I was in a very much a kind of a career starter job. So I'd finished college and made up my mind that I couldn't possibly move back to my hometown. It had to be London. I was so naive that when there were all these adverts going, would you like to make lots of money and work in the media? And I thought, yeah, then this job is only one phone call away. And I was like, wow, that's me. Of course, I made the phone call and it turned out it was a telesales job. Right. But the job interview was that phone call I made asking about the job. And he went, right, come in you start Monday. So for about like a day or two there, I thought I was working in the media. And I realised I wasn't when strange things began happening. And it was like people standing over you telling you what to say on the phone. But one of the things was that it did mean that we got in loads and loads to basically nick the ads out of loads and loads of newspapers and magazines from around the world. And we were sort of, they're advertising with them, we'll ring them up. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. These are all good stories. And so I started freelancing. So, because I had this not really a job, and I started trying to freelance. So, but like everybody else, nobody wants to know who you are. So when you start freelancing, you're freelancing for things like the Hilton Inn Hotel magazine and things like that. So it was literally, I was in a Hilton hotel, supposedly like taking photographs of the bar area or something like that. Mm-hmm. And there he was. And I recognised him from his author pick and went up and said I liked his book. Again, just happy accidents, really, and being up for it. That's how I met him. So it was on an assignment that I put myself on after that. I said, well, can I review your book then? And he went, you can do what you like. I don't even know you. So that led to being published. And journalism, I suppose.
Just like that. I mean, I couldn't do that.
You could do that. That's the problem. That's why everybody in journalism has terrible imposter syndrome, because we are actually the imposters. It's not a syndrome at all, but it is. It's partly that you can't. It's not like being a pilot, for example, where you go, I've flown this number of hours on this model, I've passed this certification and that certification, and I am, let's say, of this job, because there is or a surgeon or a machine, there is some definite knowledge that you have got, and you've said, I've passed this and I've passed that and I've done that. With jobs not even jobs, but with journalism, it's very much you're as good as the last pitch that you made to somebody telling them that you were sitting on a good story.
Okay.
And the last thing you wrote or the last thing you did. And so everybody's got this feeling that they're actually kind of Ziggy Stardusting it a little bit, like inventing a persona that people will be interested by, and then trying to back that up and becoming that thing. So that's really what that was. So it was literally, it was meeting him. I mean, bear in mind, when I say I started getting work commissioned, this was mainly sneaking stuff into, world of plastics and rubber technology, or, these things that on Have I Got News for You, they say these are ridiculously obscure titles. And I'm like, that's me, and only after a little while when, do you start going, okay, confident enough now, particular newspaper or, Telegraph or BBC or something like that.
Yeah.
It takes you a while, unless you are one of those people with sort of triple hyphenated names that are sort of born into it. It takes you a while being somebody from like parents with no education, even secondary education completed or anything, and not a particularly great background. It takes you a little while to actually get over what William Blake would have called the mind-forged manacles that you're wearing in your head.
So it's a case of I want to take myself seriously, or I want other people to take me seriously.
Well. If I answer that question for you, does that mean I pay you £100 an hour to be my therapist? Because this is about to happen, right? I'm going to. So it's pretty much. So I think it's the second.
Okay.
I think it's
other people's perceptions of me.
Yeah, because you're from a nowhere place with no expectations or anything like that. And you just probably, apart from the instinct to run like hell away from your hometown and to land in a soup of people containing whatever it is, 7 or 9 million souls. And the same thing people will always do at every party you go to, be like, yeah, what do you do then, man? And you and at that point you want to go, international swashbuckler. No, you don't want to do that. But what you want to do is you want to say, well, I do this. Are you any good? Yeah, because that. And so really, I think there's a lot of if I'm being brutally honest with myself, I think there's probably a lot of trying to form an identity that you can say is worthwhile through creating things around you. And a lot of people do that through building a family, building a home, or a hobby, or whatever. And I probably have done it through trying to discover it. Some people do it through travelling and trying to discover places, and I've done it through trying to unearth gubbins.
This is actually a really strong and completely separate podcast, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people will resonate to that. Me in particular, it's persona. It's trying to become something that you either don't see as achievable,
right,
or you never saw yourself doing.
Yeah.
And then the reason you run away, I guess, from the previous life is because you're not happy with
100%
how it was going.
Yeah. And a lot of us have very, I do think a lot of us have an unacknowledged quality of the Gothic in our childhoods. Whether whatever it was, whether it was unhappiness, being a latchkey kid, bullying, neglect, whatever it was, or just the sense that we weren't enough. I think a lot of achievement is driven by the need to quieten the inner voices, probably. I've got this, it is odd, right? So when I tell people, I don't tell people, when people ask, I've read this book or that book, what happened? And I was like, well, I was in Afghanistan or I was in, in Serbia under Milosevic trying to find this and that out, and there were these criminals or in Russia that time, and people are like, oh, bloody hell, that sounds quite leery. And I'm like, so do you know what? I've literally got this voice in my head, well, not really literally, but meaning figuratively, but I do have this deep sense that I call myself lazy. I think I'm feckless. I think I lack courage or whatever. So a lot of things I do are to try to prove to myself that I'm not lazy and that I will do it and that I'm going to bloody do it. And you do have courage. And that I do have courage. And I think doubt is self-doubt is a fact of life for a lot of people. I think it's a big fact of life for me, but I think it's going to sound really crap, but I think it's a secret weapon as well. I think if you can go, that's what that is. I know you, and I know what you're trying. And what I'm going to say is no. But I'm going to do it in ways that are constructive rather than toxic, right? Which, for example, like people who have overwhelming self-doubt might become like somebody who puts other people down, or somebody who's like, I'm the big I am. But I'm like, well, okay, what's this trying to say to me? And can I use it as fuel? I think
you hit the nail on the head. And when I set up Air Max Aviation, one of the focuses of the business was being able to prioritise mental health and well-being in the workplace, because, like you said, everyone's got layers to them. Yeah. And in a business transaction, specific logistics, which is really stressful, you might not necessarily get to see all those layers. But where, like you said, it fuels you. Yeah. There are individuals with strengths that go unnoticed because people aren't taking the time to recognise it.
It's exactly that. And I'm really glad you mentioned the layers that people have, because I think you and I, if I say business person, we've probably still got the kind of this 30-year-old cliche in our heads. It's not like we think sort of bowler hat and whatever, but it's a bit like that. It's a sort of suit, and it's the myth that gets peddled all over The Apprentice, for example, or things like people think that's a person that runs a company, a person who's, and actually the thing you're talking about is beautiful, because it's part of this, what I like to think of the great unmasking, that we don't have to go around masking all the time, pretending that everything's, we're all the same and we're all wearing a suit because that's a uniform, and we're all our brains are uniform, and we all love a spreadsheet, we do. And and we never have a day when we think this or a bad, and it might be better, like you say, to create an environment where people can be themselves and bring the special powers that, while everyone's masking and everyone's pretending to be identical, get overlooked. And if those powers are things like what we've talked about, where you can use a certain thing as an energy or a fuel, or those powers are increase of empathy so that you can identify with what a client or a customer is asking without them having to spell it out to you because you are hypervigilant for it or whatever. I think that's got to be the way, and I think the pandemic's shown us actually with the idea that there is another way. The pandemic, terrible as it was, has gone, what if we all worked from home, admitted sometimes we're not doing okay, gave each other a bit more flexibility. And there's this paradigm floating about right now that I think is, and Air Max is part of it, that I think is worth fighting for, honestly. I think it's worth fighting against all those people who go, right, everybody back to the way things used to be where they were much better. And it's like, no, not quite. We've been given a glimpse of a future we could have, more human future.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm not fighting digitization at all in my industry.
Yeah.
I agree with it in some senses, but a lot of people push it. Okay. Yeah. I don't have the budget. I probably would do a lot more in that sense if we had the budgets to play with it. But I still believe in that human element. Yeah. It's crucial for me. I don't want to deal with computer responses or sometimes the quick search doesn't give you the results which are best for you. Yeah. And it's about maintaining that human interaction.
Yeah, that's right. And it's really interesting when you talk about, the introduction of, for example, chatbots or answerbots, whatever. A guy called Cory Doctorow, I think it was, on Twitter, rest its soul, X, talked about the bullshit industrial complex that is masking itself as AI. So actually AI, what a brilliant thing. I'm a user and I'm an innovator in AI for various companies. I'm an innovator. I think of things, if they like them or not. But I think a lot of things masking as AI are not intelligent at all. They depend on you bringing, a little bit like, who remembers the great SEO wars of 2015 or whatever, when the jokes were all like, two SEO specialists walk into a bars, cafes, brasserie, and or the best Paris holidays to go on, holidays in Paris, springtime in Paris, and it made people have to cater or think they had to cater to an algorithm, and people started thinking, right, I have to dumb myself down, or I have to channel my own thoughts into such a way that it can. Now, that's fair enough, because we've got an artificial intelligence. But if it was truly contextual, like you said, then you would get an answer you wanted, because it would intuit your intent, like I can sitting here. It would be able to take in context, and things like that, and it would be able to use those things, bring them to bear. But while we have a short memory window for chatbots, it can be a red herring. And I think it can be a little bit. It can end up. We've all been there, Alexa, find me great. Here are some napkins you might want to buy. No. I didn't say that. I said, how can I have a better quality nap or whatever?
Yes.
And it ends up becoming. We all know when a situation like that arises, and it's a very familiar situation, that it serves somebody, and the person it serves is the person on the supply side, to get rid of whatever and to offshore that and to just introduce a piece of code, but it doesn't serve the user. And I think your dedication, what you're talking about is like, let's remember what we're here for, and serve the user, and have things like that when they benefit, but don't just offload our problems.
Yeah, use them to your benefit.
Right.
Because you're not listening to this podcast if it isn't for innovation and digitization.
Right.
And at the same time, it makes you feel a little bit tense. When you went, Alexa, and I'm worried about saying it now, I'm waiting for a response. I'm thinking, is there one in this room?
Right.
And also, who's listening to this? So you've now activated and ordered them some napkins.
Oh, that's hilarious, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to go off on a tangent here. And there's a book here that I want to plug for you. But also come back to there was a moment when we're talking about, your courage, self-doubt, whatever. Do you think the book is a byproduct of you trying to prove yourself, or did you set out to write a book?
Yeah.
And can we talk about the book? Now, I want you to answer quite a lot of questions. I'll give you some time to answer a question, but maybe answer that first, and then could you tell us about this book?
Yeah, so of course we can, and stumbled on it. Really, I stumbled on the story. So I'd written bits and bobs before. I'd written books before, but not with my name on. So it was like, you know, the BBC was doing a guide to summer education, whatever. And there it would be. So I knew I knew that if I had to do it, I could organise information pretty well. And then I had a photographer guy I travelled with, a big Canadian guy called Doug, awesome. And he had a line on, we'd wanted to go to, because I'd done some stuff. My curiosity had got me into it always gets me into sticky situations, but in a good way. So I've realised that somebody said to me once, you've got a real problem because when you're on the tube and there's a nutter, they're going to come and talk to you. You're an absolute magnet for these people. You don't. This lady said to me, she's a friend of mine, she said, you can't fold your arms with the expression of your face like we all can. And I thought it was a really interesting thing. I can't. So I'm like seeing somebody on the tube, you know, looking for trouble, and I'll be like, oh, hello, friend, or whatever. Right. Now, and that's something I've had to slightly tamp down. But you start hearing about things like in Afghanistan, one of the stories I'd heard was although it was a country in the early 2000s, right? So after we'd gone in, they had a couple of bakeries that were set up by women for the benefit of women who had been widowed. So if you get widowed in Afghanistan, your life is over. That's it, right? You are not only you're damaged goods, but your husband's not going to support you, so you become a beggar, effectively. So there is a lot of but this was a bakery set up called Women for Women Bakery, and I was like, that's a great story. Shall we go there? Shall we go? I'd been out to places like, you know, Serbia during the war. I was there while we were bombing it. I'd been all these quite leery places, but okay, let's go. How are we going to do that? So the one way you could fly, because you couldn't get an airline ticket out there. I mean, that was just ridiculous. So you could go to maybe to a certain place in Pakistan and go up. You could go to Tajikistan. You could try and travel overland, or there was aid being flown in and out. So we were like, okay, so there's aid organisations, so maybe we could, I don't know, hitch a lift. And we were like, well, no aid organisation would let people hitch a lift, would they? But there was this one aid organisation called Feed the Children, I think, that was very much an American organisation that it seemed like it'd been set up on a fag packet slightly. And they were flying stuff out there. And they were flying stuff out there from Aarhus in Denmark. And it was going to be on an Ilyushin 76. Very interesting plane. We'll get to that. And I was like, okay, we'll call them. So we called this person who called this person who called this person. He said, yeah, you'd be at that airport at that time and you can get on board. Whoa, okay, great. And can we have a lift back? That was the other important bit. Yeah, if you're there, again, maybe not. It turned out they couldn't give us a lift back, so we were sort of stuck there. But right, okay, we're flying into Kabul. Great. So we get to this place, and if you've seen an Ilyushin aircraft, or the 76s, they're huge. I mean, they're not as big as like an Antonov 225, but they are chubby as well. And it's sort of like they're just very impressive. And you're walking over this great big airfield in Denmark, and there they are, and there are these kind of blokes standing around. And they are looking like kind of cross between, you know, Crocodile Dundee and the Nutter on the Tube, frankly. I mean, they are and you get introduced to them and they're your flight crew. And we're a bunch of Russian and Belarusian guys. And I was like, this is very interesting. And one of them started explaining to me. I said, what are you doing, aid? He said, aid? No, we fly point to point. So every time we take off, and we're in the air all the time, every time we take off, we make sure we got something. So, yeah, we're flying this aid into Kabul. in Kabul, we're going to pick something else up, chickens, whatever, fly that to Iraq. In Iraq, fridges, fly them to Boston. In Boston, something. I was like, right, okay. And they're like Swifts. They just never land. They're just there while the cargo's being lifted and then sleep on the plane. So I was like, this is a really interesting life. And we, on the way into Kabul, a few things happened. We slept on these pallets of tomatoes and rice and things that were being flown in. And we got shot at, which is quite interesting. So you go into Kabul airport and they have to do a special maneuver to get down. So you have to fly really up really high and then corkscrew down so that you're away from the perimeters where people are going to shoot rockets at you. But they're only doing it in the way that Cornish people used to do it for ships, just to bring it down and go through the cargo and see if there's anything nice there. Well, I don't. Maybe that's the only reason. Maybe they also hate the planes. But we also found out, though, that for every bit of licit cargo that was on these flights, there was also their cargo, what they called their cargo. And their cargo was the illicit stuff. So you had a situation where, for example, aid flights that were going into Afghanistan were also bringing with them up to 15 tons of arms that would be sold elsewhere in Kabul while they were on the ground and used to shoot at the camps where the aid was going. I mean, it didn't seem to make any sense. It was mad. And I noticed that, and you found out that, for example, one of the reasons they all wanted to do aid flights for cheap or for free sometimes was that it would get them the paperwork to be allowed to fly into a war zone where other planes could, and that meant that there would be good cargo for buy and sale. So there was also, so this, having learned this, I was like, bloody hell. And because I'm quite chatty, they aren't, smugglers aren't talkative. And these airmen weren't particularly talkative. But I said to somebody, it was like, just because I'm quite chatty, I just wouldn't let them get away. And they didn't take me seriously. And that was brilliant. So I said to somebody once, it was like tap dancing in front of Johnny Cash. You were completely aware that you're being very inappropriate and you're just being a puppy. But it meant that they thought I was just this idiot who... And so they let on more than they should. And I ended up, okay, what's going on here? And that's how Outlaws Inc., flying with the world's most dangerous smugglers, the people who fly guns, gold, humans, drugs all over the world, that's how that came to be born. I just wondered what the hell had just happened to me.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. So it's right, we're going to go and do a piece on these bakeries.
Yep.
And I wasn't aware of, I guess that might be a cultural thing. Probably we're now 2024, not the same, although the situation, what's reported versus what's actually going on.
Yeah. It can be pretty harsh.
Open to interpretation. Yeah. But then, so it is a byproduct.
Yeah, exactly.
You never went out to Afghanistan initially. I mean, the fact that you went out to Afghanistan initially just suggests that you're after something interesting,
Right, but not that. And that's why that's why this thing about the most interesting phrase in science is always, hey, that's a bit weird.
So you didn't have a eureka moment.
Didn't have a eureka moment. Well, eventually.
You did.
Yeah. But mainly it was, and that's the one thing I always tell people who want to be journalists or want to be investigative or want to be any of that sort of thing, is do not close down your options. You're on this story now, but in the sawdust, while you are making that, you will find other things that you can make. And those things will often be more interesting because they will be the things that nobody's seen before. So it turned out, people knew about the Women for Women bakery. They had, I can't remember what the charity was, but they got backing. They ended up being quite, talked about as a kind of global cause célèbre. So if it had just been that, then that was the story. And that would have become a normal story. But in doing that, I noticed a few different things. So I ended up learning a lot more than I wanted to about mine placement and how the world's getting around that. So that was one byproduct. This was another byproduct. There was a lot of byproduct. Always look in your swarf on the factory floor.
So is this the diamond in the sand for you? Is it one of the things? What is this book to you?
Oh, right, yeah. What is it to me? So it's looking back on it, because it was published in 2012 now, 2011. Looking back on it, this book it's a really. I'm glad I did it. It's like my firstborn kid. I'm glad I did it, because it's like that opened the doors to all the other kind of non-fiction work that I've been doing. And when kind of Pam Macmillan bought it, I was like, oh, so that was this. We talked earlier about the sort of search for some sort of validation, and that felt like a bit of a validation. But what it mainly did, and the other thing, I don't think I've ever really talked on a podcast or telly or radio about this before. But the other thing it did is it showed me how to use the story in a way that isn't route one. Right, I'll explain. If you're in a band, you will put an album out. And unless you're very lucky or have a great number of fans who enjoy vinyls or something like that, your album now will not make you a lot of money. Or a dedicated Bandcamp following who donate. Your album itself will be the thing that you need to do in order for the other stuff to happen, for whatever. So it's like that with books. Unless you are, a J.K. Rowling or a whatever, you don't make the money. What you do is people start to know and come towards you because you did this book. And so because that book, I'm writing a Hollywood film adaptation has been bought. Which, by the way, okay, very, very quick story.
Of this?
Right, yeah, of this, of Outlaws Inc. So, very quick story, absolutely hilarious. When Hollywood is talking to you and when they buy your thing, you get to meet cliched Hollywood people, right? So you're on the phone, for example, Mr. Potter, Mr. Ivaniak is ready to talk to you now. And you get put through. And it's like being, what was his name? Barton Fink in a Coen Brothers movie or something. So you can hear cigars on the phone. So it'll be like, Matt, I just want to tell you, I love your book. And the fact it's about these outlaw Russian airmen at the end of the Cold War, and they had no choice, Matt. So what are they going to do? And that's the key of the stuff. And they smuggle things, but they're good men. Or are they? They're anyhow. Now, Matt, love your book. Don't want to change a thing. Matt, I go, what? They're American. I'm like, are they? Yeah, because they got to be American. I'm like, okay. Right, because you're the guy who, I'm the guy who's sort of, as it were, chopped down the wood to give to you. You're IKEA, you make the thing, right? But if they're American, why are they doing it other than being not very good? Because there's no sense that they don't have a choice. And why isn't? We'll get around that. All right. And they do that. So that's a real thing. Love your work, love your story, changing everything about it. It's fine. But if you keep your ears open, you can learn gold, right? So one of the other things that could have been an insult but wasn't, because it's just so brilliant and so blithely meant, is he goes, Matt, so tell me, have you thought about who you want to star as you in the movie? And I'm like, I lied. I said no. I had.
Yeah.
And I said no. He goes, good, because Matt, you're out of the movie. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Out of the movie.
Right. You're not in the movie. So I'm like, that's. Again, all cool. You bought the thing. I'm, on there as the. How come? So what's the thinking, man? And this is where I learned loads, because you learn so much about movie craft. Because he goes to me, if we got you in the movie, then we got a narrator, and then you're looking back and you're thinking what could have happened, and that's an Oscar movie, Matt. That's Last King of Scotland. That's wistful. It's a rite of passage, Matt. You take the narrator out, and what do you got? And I'm like, I don't know. What you got a big fucking dumb action movie, Matt, and that's what we're making. And I'm like, wow, that's actually really interesting. So I said to him. And he goes, yeah, if you take the narrator, the sort of self-aware thing out, every movie instantly becomes Con Air.
Yeah, rather than I'm thinking for me, the biggest narrator, Forrest Gump.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Forrest Gump, or The Last Kid, all these movies where people are looking and thinking it could have been like this and it could have been. But again, wipe it free of any self-awareness, and it is planes being blown up, people running about.
It sells. They're thinking box office.
That's exactly it.
Thriller.
Yeah, and it's and there's a lot of really again they've started filming, but you don't start filming with your stars in case something happens. You start filming stuff that if the stars drop out or it doesn't get, you can reuse for other films. So the first thing they've done is gone to like South Africa, right out in the middle of nowhere, and been blowing up planes and filming planes blowing up. And it's because literally they make their own almost like library footage. If the movie doesn't wrap, or if it wraps and it's a failure, don't matter. Look, we'll always need planes blowing up under a blue sky
Just
somewhere.
stock.
Right, it's stock. They generate their own stock as the first task of a movie. And I love things like that. I mean, that to me is almost like, I won't say it's another story, but that's like a whole world. Like it feels like being David Attenborough, where he goes like, look at this pond, absolute boring pond. Or is it? Yeah. Here's the reveal with all the mini beasts, and it's, so that's my favourite thing.
I pictured where you mentioned the cigars. I'm picturing that, and he's got his feet up on the table.
He's exactly what he's got.
Yeah. And probably some ugly burgundy suit,
right?
And a cowboy hat, and some aviator glasses. And
You've seen the same vision as I have, and there's people around nodding vigorously at everything he says. Yeah, it's exactly that.
I don't know why I'm thinking Anchorman now, but it's the way you've portrayed it, and I guess that's part of your storytelling ability. The way you deliver that is fascinating, as is the book. Now, I haven't reread it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Because again, I think when we spoke on the phone, when I was introducing you into the podcast and Archie came on and said, I don't like to script anything. I like it to be raw.
Yeah.
If I reread the book, I'm going to have too many prompts. And also, we don't want to, I'm hoping that people are listening to this going, don't talk about the book because I now want to buy it. But there is something that I have repeated to people. I didn't realise I got this story from Outlaws Inc.
Yeah.
And I haven't mentioned this yet, but an old director of mine was in this industry when I worked for one of the largest brokerages, recommended this book to me. Now, he's the sort of person, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a spotter. I don't sit outside Gatwick, with a clipboard and binoculars, but I can look up and tell you what aircraft it is, the livery, where it's probably going to. He could look up and tell you what engines are fitted to this aircraft. It's just another level, but really, really knowledgeable when it came to that ex-Soviet or Soviet era made aircraft.
Right.
And these discussions were had, and even to this day, on Twitter now X, there's a lot of data put out there about Libyan activity with Illusion 76 aircraft. So we know that these things still happen.
Yeah.
But he recommended this book. I read it, and it's the aircraft that performed the flight that no one else could do. And the reason I like it is because it just fits in so well with what I do on a day-to-day basis, which is outside of the box thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Delivering something in a way which no one else expected or could think of. Yeah. And that's what gives you a competitive edge. And
absolutely.
They didn't do anything wrong.
No, absolutely. I mean, and I guess the big story of that is there's a wind turbine delivery in Afghanistan in the book, and it comes at the start and I remember hearing about it from a couple of people gossiping about it when it happened in the aviation in the UK, and we're just going, what the hell? And it was, I'll tell you the story very briefly. So there was a location in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan, and a wind turbine had to be brought in and delivered. Because it was in the middle of nowhere, there was nowhere to take off from. And so a lot of these guys, everyone said, no, we can't do it. We can get in, we could potentially land, but we couldn't get out again. No, it's not doable. It's not doable. And then this bunch of Russian guys went, no, doable. And everyone's like, really? Doable? Yeah, doable. Yeah. Well, how much? A lot of money. Oh, yeah, some money, yeah, but doable. We'll make a plan. And so the guys who had to install the wind turbine and all these other people were there. and they saw this Ilyushin 76, this battered old, like you say, Soviet era plane, made in the 60s, but known for being able to land like a mattress on any ground at all, which is one of the reasons they're favoured. Flew in, landed, wheels splat down, sort of in the sand, you know, and the scree, and just like sat there. Wind turbine unloaded. And everyone was like, okay, brilliant. All right. Okay, brilliant. What are you going to do now? At this point, this minibus came rattling over the horizon, picked up all the airmen that had just flown in this Ilyushin, and then rattled off again. And as they rattled off, the guy said, well, we're not going to do anything. We're going to leave it here. It's just an old plane. It's just an old plane. That's it. We never planned to fly it out. And everyone's just like, oh, why didn't we think of that? A jalopy. Use it for what it's good for. And that has become almost like a sculpture there in the desert. And I think, you know, that's one thing that this guy called Ian Clark, who worked at Uganda Airport, said to me, in Tebbe actually, said to me, he said, look, these guys, everybody knows that they they might fly a little bit fast and loose. Everybody knows that they might not always go by the paperwork. That's the curse, right? Number one, that's the curse. Are they legal? Are they licensed? No, they can't fly anymore over the EU. They can't fly anymore over the UK, not in this model, not in this make, because it's too dirty, it's too noisy, what have you. Is what they're doing dodgy? I don't know. The cargo they're taking for me certainly isn't. And that's there, and that's all above board. What else they've got in the boot of their taxi cab, I don't know. What I can tell you is, like nobody else, these guys will go, they'll be like, he compared them to, what's the character on Pulp Fiction? Wolf, is it? Played by Harvey Keitel, who goes like, you have a body minus a head in a car in a garage. Take me to it. We're going to clean it up. So he just says they'll make a plan. They'll hear this impossible job, and everyone will be going, no, the insurance won't cover it, or no. And they'll go, there's a way. We'll find a way. Now, the problem for the world, in a way, you know, I don't want to make these guys out to be heroes or you know, they're economic players in a world that monetizes and rewards the getting around of rules. You know, make of that what you will, global capitalism, but make of that what you will. But they are, because of this, because of what they do, and people do know about it, because of what they do, they fly astonishingly cheaply on their licit flights. So they offer very cheap rates. And there is no shortage of, and it's not just naive, you know, occasionally naive charities who aren't that buttoned up on their compliance, but it's also things like, you know, the UN or governments or militaries in certain parts of the world will use them because it's like, oh, bloody civic spirited of these chaps. They've said they'll fly into this disaster zone for us for very little, for nothing. It's amazing, well done. Now they're doing that for nothing because that's not the real cargo that they're making their money off. They're doing that for nothing effectively as a way of getting permission to be there, permission to fly that route, clearance to do it, a reason to be there for however long till it. And actually they're going to make their money off, look, it might not always be guns. It might be toothpaste or whatever else. But there's always going to be some extra that's being taken through customs. And because of the asymmetries in the world, if you are a customs official or just a police official in Democratic Republic of Congo or Somalia or Afghanistan, earning the equivalent of $1 a day, and this cargo comes in and there's a conversation gets had, you are absolutely not going to go, police, stop this instantly, this beastliness. So yeah, the will make a plan means that they are sometimes the only people who can get into, you know, flooded areas in Pakistan or are willing to try. But we all have to accept that willingness to go, to be too good to be true, or to do it without going by the rule book, or to do it also means that certain very problematic things are going to happen to make that happen, you know. But it does mean that for the rest of it's an interesting flag. It's like for everybody who is a licit and legitimate operator, there's almost like a really clear demarcation. So there's it helps. Great metaphor. It helps people regulated by the Financial Services Authority that there are loan sharks doing bad things, because it means that there is a reason for people to go with an official regulated supplier of financial services. Whereas right. So it's almost like the fact that these things do keep happening, and they keep happening. It's not. It was Russian air crews. A lot of it was. It was post-Soviet air crews, basically. And it was for the very good reason that they came back after the Soviet-Afghan war, where a lot of them had been flying military logistics out, and were told, thanks for your service. Look, the pensions we promised to pay you, the wages that we owe you, the job that we've got, we're disbanding it and we got no money, and good luck, bye. And they basically looked at the general telling them that, looked at their plane, looked at the general, looked at the plane and thought, right, okay, screw you, I'm having that. And I'll go into business as man with a van in the sky. That's as a blunt instrument. Those. Now, if your man with a van operation starts like that in a country where all the Kalashnikovs are suddenly being sold off, that starts to explain why around 92 Kalashnikov fueled civil wars crop up everywhere from Somalia through Rwanda to whatever. And you think, well, bloody Kalashnikov, what the hell? And the reason is because somebody somewhere has gone into business on a freelance basis with no knowledge of regulation, no concern for it, bit of desperation and a lot of guns. And all I'll say is that the fact that the world keeps getting stung like that means that there's always going to be somebody breaking the rules. But it means that if you are thinking of chartering at all, as a charity, a government, an industrial player, whatever, for goodness sake, do the paperwork and make sure you're going by the book, because otherwise you can get involved in some seriously dodgy stuff.
Absolutely.
That's a long answer.
No, I guess I'm sitting here interested in the book and its contents and wondering how much of it is hearsay. Or first-hand experience, like you actually witnessed these things happening. And I just want to be clear that we're aware. And I think these things, like anything, is out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah,
and
100%.
What I mean by that is, this is air chartering. So anyone listening to this now will be like, oh, really? Is that going on? And you might mention a few companies or a few specific airline types, and you get like this blanket opinion, or you just mentioned Russians, and if you're like, you said you're this Hollywood director, we want them to be Americans. There's this blanket opinion, but you're quite right in saying that you do things properly, compliantly, do your due diligence, and this kind of activity is rare.
Yeah, absolutely. And the tools are there to do your due diligence. I mean, even like Oxfam now has not just now, but Oxfam as a charity operates its own auditing system for suppliers of transport, where they've got a kind of traffic light system where this one has been cited, this one is struck off, this one is, so the tools are there. And as you say, if you do a little bit of your homework, it will reveal it. It's not like anyone doesn't know.
And also, a lot of it is above board.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is the straight. But again, out of sight, out of mind. But we've got facilities here in the United Kingdom that manufacture missiles.
Oh, absolutely.
When you think about every policeman, every member of the British Armed Forces, whether it's a dual use item, so it could be something that's adapted for military use, or just the ammunition and the weapons that are used on our territory here in this nation. They're arriving by sea or by air,
right? But
officially.
I mean, that's the fascinating thing. That is the fascinating thing about this, is when you start to dig into it, you realise fairly quickly it becomes clear that part of the problem is that no no cargo is illegal. Somewhere it's legal. Somewhere else it might not be. In the air, often it's between things. So it's like the cargo itself is not a thing that you can catch people for a lot of the time, because again, there are things, as you say, like I don't know how many people listening to this will know about end user certificates, but if you're importing, let's say, arms, or you're transporting arms, you might be transporting them to a place where they are either legal or illegal, and it will depend on an end user certificate. So that you have got an end user certificate from the government of that country, the Ministry of Defence, saying this is for our use and it will not be given on to anyone else, and so on. Now, there's a problem with end user certificates in the sense that they are only ever as good as the end user and their intent. They are. Because so at that point, your beef is with, let's say, the government of Uganda, because they're going to give them straight away to perhaps irregular soldiers on the border who are going to, So it went to the right person, but can we control what happens after? And the other thing is that, I've made an end user certificate with a bubble jet printer that fooled somebody. They're not more than they seem to be. They are bits of paper, not where there are electronic trails in most developed economies, but in a lot of places in the world, you'll show a thing, and if it looks good enough to pass with plausible deniability, you're through.
That is why anyone chartering really needs to be using someone that knows what they're doing, because, like you said, we're not going to deny that these things happen. I'll use the word allegedly, right? I'm not sitting here with evidence of this and that, but I know that I'm in a heavily regulated industry where compliance and risk are mandatory.
Exactly
as far as I'm concerned. I'm a member of the Air Charter Association, and I wanted to touch on that because I think at the very least, anyone you're dealing with should be an Air Charter Association
Absolutely
member. Because it means that you're adding that extra level to your business. You've got to be vetted.
Absolutely.
You've got to pass certain criteria to become a member. That's already going to help. When you're dealing with suppliers, I use Aleutian 76s, Antonov 12s, Antonov 124s.
They're wonderful vehicles, right?
Brilliant. They do exactly what you need to do.
I love the Antonov 12. It's like known for just
the workhorse.
Yeah, absolutely.
The workhorse.
They're marvellous. Nothing will bring them down. I've seen some brought down, but they will survive all sorts of treatment. I've flown in them, held together with sellotape, bits coming off, somebody holding a bit on. But yeah, absolutely the workhorse. And and the glue that holds a lot of economies together as well, right? Places without really smooth infrastructures on the ground, those things are the transport network. A lot of the time,
and they're perfect often for the type of cargo. In the oil and gas industry, let's say, where you've got drill pipes being moved around. It's the perfect cargo for that sort of aircraft.
Lovely.
And they are willing to I'm talking about territories. It's their landing capabilities.
Yes.
And in fact, like you mentioned, the Aleutian 76, for me, in terms of design, that is one of the most awesome aircraft there is. Because it just looks like a hawk.
Absolutely.
The landing gear is like talons.
Exactly.
They're like talons.
And the sort of weird expression it's got on its face, where it's like this little frown coming in. It's absolutely, I call it its face. Does anyone else think of vehicles as having expressions?
Well, we do.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Great.
Into aircraft. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And it's just, and you're right. You're so right. Everything about it kind of leans forward onto those talons. And I don't know anyone who's seen one or flown one or flown in one that doesn't just go, whoa, look at that. They're
awesome.
They are. And they are classics. If we talk about, not enough people talk about cargo planes as things of beauty. People always are, the Spitfire or whatever, but not enough people go, do you know what, that Aleutian, that is like a Bugatti. That is as evocative of beauty and of capability and of time and place as anything you'll ever see. But yeah, that's
you've got to be into it. You've got to be into it because if it's trains, I'm not going to look at it. There's that Instagram guy, Francis
Bourgeois.
where
Legend.
he's just upset, and it's him that makes it addictive,
right?
But you see
exactly
the train come along, and I'm like,
generic train number one.
That didn't do anything for me. But with the aircraft, yes, they come into. They're in a different category, obviously, to modern day aircraft. And I think the point you make, people don't talk about them, is if I speak to someone that's not in aviation or from an aviation background, they don't even know that on a long haul flight on a wide body aircraft, there's a good 40 ton of freight underneath them.
Right, the belly,
They think it's baggage.
Absolutely.
It's my baggage, my holiday bag, that's all that's underneath there. And it's in your peripheral when you're sitting there choosing what you're going to watch next. The container's coming off. Or the cargo, they didn't notice the cargo on, or human rain, sadly, in some cases, on a lot of flights. But your flight, let's talk about one of the major trade lanes, Heathrow, New York.
Oh, yeah.
Just there. All those aircraft that are fighting for the kilo shipments
absolutely
in the belly,
right.
Whether it's the Cocoa Pops or the Marmite back, I don't know what our best export is in the hold of their aircraft, or what the best import is, but it's all those sorts of things, and that will be sold in large quantities, and that will be sitting under you in a passenger flight. And then you've got aircraft that are capable of taking 70, 80 ton generators that are 4 meters high, and you try and explain that to someone, and also give them the pricing that it costs, and they're not familiar with logistics or the industry.
It's insane, isn't it?
Just can't.
Absolutely. I always think it's like that iceberg drawing, where what people see of a plane is the most obvious bit, and it's very small. And one of the things with a lot of the let's say a lot of the kind of more wildcat operator illusions, because it wouldn't obviously it doesn't happen with illicit operators, and it's just a plane. It's like anything else. It's just very neutral. But they'll create almost like bathroom conversions on theirs as well. And it's always fascinating. You'll know what it's like when you take out, even if you're in just any old plane, 727 or whatever. You take off the sort of the plastic shell that you're sitting in, and it's bigger than you think. Right, it's like when you move into a new house and you go, oh, the rooms are massive, and then you put your furniture in, you go, oh, normal room, and that's what. But they're actually in a lot of these people I flew with, and yes, to answer the question, I was absolutely flying with them and sleeping on the floor of the plane, and it was very hot and it was very greasy and it was quite smelly after a while, but mostly a vodka, I won't lie, and that was just the pilot. But there was. You could see that they'd like ripped out a lot of the safety installations. They'd ripped out a lot of things just to make more room for the loadmaster. So one of the things is that there's a reason. You look at the Aviation Safety Database run by the Aviation Safety Network, and you'll go through rashes. Not so much now, but until about. Well, still now with some of them, but you go through rashes of a place, and it will often be around. A lot of it may be Central Africa. At one point, a lot of it was Somalia. Internally within the sort of Russian sphere of influence, you'll see crashes, and you'll see that a number of people on board and where they were, and it was an airline that's been struck off, or an airline that And part of the reason is because there's so much pressure on the loadmasters and on the crews to take just this bit extra. If you take this, there'll be money in it for you. If you take. And the pressure is so huge that part of the problem is they'll either crash on takeoff or they won't clear the next mountain. And it's really grim, And I think part of the point about going, as you say, about going with people and going with operators who are fully registered, whose paperwork is up to date, who do things, but is that your stuff will get there. Because otherwise there is just going to be, it's like this thing about, somebody offering to do your, let's say someone comes and offers to do your driveway for 50 quid. They're going to make their money somehow. And it's not from you, not with that. How are they doing it? Or if someone offers to do, a bunch of marketing work for you for free, what are they really marketing? Because it won't be you. And I think the same is true of transport, of certainly of logistics and air transport. If somebody's offering to take, for example, this flight, I flew in sleeping on the top of a box of rice and tomatoes, but the first time into Afghanistan. The NGO that had commissioned it was like a my own NGO, right? Mongos, people who oftentimes will be, let's say somebody in the US who is for various reasons, has become frustrated with apparent inaction and the slowness of the international community. A lot of it going on right now for obvious reasons that you can see. People going like, these people are starving over there. Damn it, nobody's doing anything. Right. We'll have a whip round in our church and we'll collect a bunch and I'll fly them sandwiches. I'll literally fly them sandwiches. And I'm not kidding when I say sandwiches. That was one of the things that ma and pa operations who believe that red tape is the problem are more often the problem. As in so much. Believing that, if it wasn't for all this regulation, those people would be... You will then go through Google. There's an interesting, aviation logistics outfit who operates out of here, says they'll do so. They'll see us at this airport on a week Wednesday, no questions asked. That's the perfect answer. Why isn't everybody doing that? And they need to think twice. Because there's always a reason why not everybody's doing it.
Yes, and it's concerning. It's worrying. Especially in a price-driven world. Right. It's bottom dollar. And it's like sometimes you're just begging people to consider the additional things that you're saying.
That thing, it's exactly that. I mean, I don't know whether you're familiar with this, but there was a point in the reason all this took off in a big way in the 90s. Before that, you'd had like Air America, you'd had all of these. But the reason it took off in a big way in the 90s was because post Cold War, a lot of people started asking, why are we funding all this defence anymore? So America started rattling the sort of the purse a little bit at the United Nations and going, well, you guys, we're still contributing Cold War levels. I mean, I don't see why we should. You lot over there, all you new states, what are you contributing? So the UN started getting into a bit of trouble in budget terms and used to have a standing group of planes and cut that down and said, right, we'll put it out to freelance. And that's the interesting thing is that it's very much a barometer for what's happened to the world since that point. We're in the age of, we've got a subcontracting organisation who subcontract the subcontractors, who'll sort that out. We're outsourcing. It's all being outsourced. Brilliant. Now, what that does is the moment something's outsourced, it's also the moment you lose sight of a little bit of something. Unless you've got, like you say, the regulatory framework giving you that reassurance, then you don't know who's being phoned up to come and do this thing, because you're 7 chains of command away and nobody knows who the person at the end is. And that's, I think there's a lot of scenarios we can all think of, whether it's, crappy, sort of robber landlords with properties, or or healthcare services that turn out to have, or school services that have been outsourced that turn out to not build with the right concrete. There's so much of it is to do with people looking at the price of things and not thinking about the cost of things. And like you say, if they're looking at the bottom line and thinking we could get that off by going with these people and not worrying about that, you're fooling yourself a little bit, aren't you? Because you're taking something off, but the thing you're losing, it's like I could drive my car without a seatbelt because it might cut production costs for the car and I might get it a bit cheaper. But I'll not know what I'm losing until it's happened.
Yeah, it's very frustrating for... I mean, I don't see that often because we only work with carefully vetted suppliers. It's not as if we're exposed to the Outlaws Inc. sort of market. I'd like to state that the Ukrainians, the Russians, the Belarusians, there are sanctions that change and
absolutely
every day something changes in the market and you've got to be aware of it. So
exactly that, and the last thing I'd want anyone to go is, I'm not dealing with this company because they're from this place. I mean, that's absolutely not the way it works.
Yeah, and as you know, from flying to you say it. You mentioned a few places that if you're living here in the United Kingdom and you said, for example, DRC, Democratic Republic, people know nothing about that area.
Right. Yeah.
And so you just make an assumption.
And
it's not true
exactly
a lot of the time.
Exactly that.
The same way you can't just... I was watching a Dragon's Den thing the other day and a woman was blaming her suppliers and she was blanket blaming Spanish people as being dishonest.
Yeah.
And and it was an old episode. It was like I had Duncan Bannatyne on it and they were
basically... He absolutely chewed her an extra one, didn't he?
Exactly. They were basically just labelling a whole nation here. And it's the same thing as aviation, right? In my job, you need to make sure that you're up to date with what's going on.
Yeah.
Let's just say last week, Cargolux decided they're not going to carry disposable vapes because of the negative media associated with it. Like you said, that's a bit of cargo that will be not okay to some, but okay to others. And depending on where you're flying, it's fine. And then other places, it's not.
Yeah.
We, on a daily basis, just need to make sure that we're keeping up to date with market trends, that we're speaking to risk and compliance consultants, and that we're checking things.
Yeah. And good luck with it as the world transforms away from growing tobacco fields to hemp fields and cannabis for CBD products as well. I mean, that's going to become quite a hot topic, right? Because CBD products are...
I've had it.
Right, absolutely.
And someone wanted to move it by air.
Right.
A company in the UK that's got the required licenses to move it from Prague.
Yeah, right.
But everyone thinks cannabis.
Exactly that. Yeah.
And suddenly it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And
it's funny, isn't it?
And you've got to jump, and actually you do need to jump through the hoops and you need to make sure you do. Yeah. And as restrictive as it might seem, if you want to provide a solution, you need to make sure that you've done your homework and
really
you've consulted the right sort of people. Even just speaking to the bank. Yeah. I'm going to pay for a flight that is carrying this. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's really interesting. You mentioned Duncan Bannatyne because I interviewed him one time, and and I know that Dragon's Den is like a game show, really. I mean, it's it's not like Bill Gates would appear on Dragon's Den or any really major successful people because it wouldn't be worth their time. But it was quite interesting because he's obviously quite a sharp bloke. And I said to him once, because when I was a teenager, I used to suffer quite badly from OCD. And so I used to be like, oh, if I do that, will that prove to be the wrong decision? If I do that, I used to get quite paralysed by decisions that could be important. And I said to him, if you think, it could be really important, it could make, how do you decide? Do you ever get paralysed by not being able to decide and think, should I, shouldn't I? And he said, no, because I split it into two. He says, I split every business decision into two, and that's the only thing that's allowed me not to worry. I said, tell me. And he said, well, every decision is two decisions. The first one is instinctive, just instinct. Do I like that? Does that sound good? Does that sound interesting? If the answer is yes, don't worry, nothing to decide now. But everything after that becomes due diligence. So he said, expand the definition of due diligence for yourself. Rather than just can I cover it? It's like it proper kicking the tires time. So if you say, yes, instinctively I like it, but I won't think about the problems. So I'm through that gate. And now I turn to the problems. Are there any? No. And I think with air cargo, it's really the same. It's like, okay, that sounds great. And now, as a collaborative venture, we turn to making sure this is buttoned up and tight, because it's where people let themselves, they're my own NGO people go, oh, brilliant, oh, great, don't worry about the rest, it's all red tape, that it goes wrong. But I think it's the mature regulatory framework that we have is one of the best ways of almost like having a Yoda that you can say, help me here with my due diligence. Is this certified? Does this talk to your bank, talk to whatever it is? And people shouldn't be afraid of that. I think a lot of people, when they get carried away and think there's a job that's really exciting, don't want to hear an objection or don't want to ask about what's involved because they think, oh, that might piss on my fire.
Yeah.
But actually, it's almost like asking for that feedback and that collaborative that is a way of keeping you safe and keeping it problem-free, down the line.
and it's how fraudsters work, isn't it? Because they sell you the dream. You feel like you're going to miss out on an opportunity.
So much.
And when you're naive, saying no to potential money you're going to earn, especially if you're paid with commission, or it's dangerous because you might. I wouldn't say people actively ignore the red flags, but maybe just don't acknowledge that they're there.
Oh yeah, I'm a red flag ignorer. That's literally should be my social media biog. Sail past the red flag. so I feel that because there's always this thing of FOMO comes in. Oh, am I missing out on this? Oh, is this the thing? Is this? The more you feel that, the more you owe your as it were, you're the better angel of your nature to bring that into the room and go.
You've got to have knowledge and you've got to have experience.
Right.
I've had situations where I'm asking questions that I'm entitled to ask.
Yeah.
It's a new customer. They've come up with something like they're all excited. They want this job done. They've got they're related to a government official. It could be something like that, and it usually starts in that sort of way. And then when you start asking the questions, the dialogue is you're killing the dialogue.
You're killing the dialogue. Exactly that.
And a lot of people would try and just I'd say the more naive people would probably try and salvage the relationship and continue.
You become eager to please at that point, don't you?
Rather than accept or acknowledge that the reason this is losing momentum is because you're asking the right questions.
100%.
And they don't want to answer
100%.
Or give you the right answers. They want to give you the wrong answers.
Yeah. And they want their, whether it's uncritical or mendacious enthusiasm to infect you to the point where you're, and I think there's, I never thought I'd be mentioning this, but one of the most impactful documentaries I ever saw was like years ago on Channel 4. And it was people from like Britain, just like regular people whose dream was to go and work in the adult industry in America. Right. And the producer was on the screen talking to one of them going, okay, so you're going to be part of this show. Part of my duty of care towards you is we've done the consultation, what the problems can be, risk analysis. What we advise you to do is write down in advance now, in the cold light of day, what your boundaries, what your lines are, what you are prepared to do and what you're not prepared to do. And consult that. If you're ever being pressured, consult that. And go, don't feel that, just go, oh, well, unfortunately, that's part of my T's and C's. And there was one person on there who went, no, I don't need that. No, I don't need that. And they were the person who, by the end of the series, was in a terrible situation. I'm not going to describe the situation, but was in a situation that their best self at the start of their thing said they would never want to get into because they were pressured, they were being emotionally manipulated, they were being kind of like cajoled and so on and so forth, and we all compromise, as it were, one finger, one toe at a time until we don't realise it. And I think that is the best explanation in a way of a regulatory framework and of having a dispassionate and expert somebody they can consult, someone like you who can say, let's bring all the external realities into this. That's what you'd like to do. Let's see if that really stacks up for us. And I think it's almost like if people start to relate it, not as like, I personally, I hate the term red tape. I hate the term red tape with a vengeance. I think it's one of those kind of, can I say boomer? It's one of those boomer things where people go, oh, it's red tape, isn't it? It's all red tape. And if you ask, I've worked with small businesses, and if you ask any small business owner, what do you think of red tape? Oh, I hate it. What about the amount of red tape that you deal with then? Oh, too much. Nobody will ever say, oh, I think there's just the right amount of regulation or oh, I'd like a little bit more protection from these frameworks because I'm finding that a reputationally correct person but everyone always got this idea that they're supposed to, a bit like nanny state. It's become this thing that everyone's supposed, we hate that. And I'm like, what's so wrong with a state being able to support the people who work in it a little bit, right? So red tape if you start to see these regulations not as your critic and, saboteur for your big dream, but as the scaffolding on which you can build it securely, that's got to be the answer. I don't get I mean, I do get it because emotionally, when I've got to be in my bonnet, I don't want anyone to rain on my parade either, to be fair. But I'm not flying generators into Afghanistan on the daily, you know, or not that I'll tell you about. No, that was a joke, everyone.
Well, I've known about it because you'd obviously
you would know. I've gone through.
Me.
You absolutely, we would be in partnership.
and I'd say it doesn't matter if it's a competitor of mine. I've got to champion it and say use someone that's authorised by the Air Charter Association that knows what they're doing, that's got tenure in the industry. Yeah. I'd totally accept, and I get questioned all the time by new businesses, big businesses. They've got compliance departments. Yeah. I've got to prove myself. Yeah, because we're technically a startup, been going since May 2022. Yeah, but from the moment we launched, we make sure we did things properly. Yeah, and I think we'll be wrapping up soon. But obviously, I spoke to the Air Charter Association and made them aware of the subject of today's subject. Yes, because it might be a bit of an odd
awesome.
one. We're obviously here to talk about the book. I want to show that to the camera. There we go. Outlaws Inc.
There it is.
I had one with a different front page.
Yeah, the red kind of very red one. Yeah. That was the initial run. This one that's out now has got an extra chapter or an extra half a chapter in it. Dealing with the arrest of Victor Boot, the Merchant of Death.
So buy it. There'll be a link, won't there?
There will be a link. Absolutely.
An affiliate link. So with the regulations and compliance, I just wanted to read. This is from the Air Charter Association website. Anyone that's wants to chart an aircraft is maybe concerned about the do's and don'ts should refer to the Air Charter Association.aero. And the Air Charter Association supports our members by campaigning on key issues impacting the industry. We also work to ensure compliance to the highest standards that our members commit to follow. So being a member, we commit to following those standards. And this is more tailored to, it is tailored to the passenger side of chartering. And it's the illegal charter day, which is on the 21st of January. On the 21st of January 2019, the Premiership footballer Emiliano Sala and the pilot tragically lost their lives when the aircraft was crashed into the English Channel. Mm-hmm. This was an illegal charter flight and raised global awareness of the issue. The media coverage on both the accident and the subsequent legal prosecution and trial. In memory of this fatal accident and to continue our efforts to widen awareness and ultimately reduce illegal charter activity, we have designated 21st of January Fly Legal Day. Yeah. So as I say, go to the website, read up on this. That was because of that incident.
Yeah. But it's that is not an isolated incident. I mean, I've sat in the High Court in the Strand at the trial of some bloke who owned a light aircraft and offered to fly a hockey team or a football team somewhere in Switzerland, and it went down. And it was like, well, no, I just owned it and said to my pilot, were you licensed to carry? Were you licensed to carry live passengers? Were you? And no. And there's this naivety and this kind of, it gets people into trouble. It's a bit like the unlicensed minicabs. I'd be a blooming fool to get into an unlicensed minicab. And I think there's been a good amount of education around that. And I think anything to do with the event in January around making people aware that unlicensed or illegal flights or flights that are in infraction of one or two of the kind of the regulatory framework, it's a really good thing. And I think if out of Outlaws Inc., people can be, like you said, well, I wasn't aware that was happening or that, even though you're probably one of the most clued up people I've ever spoken to about this industry. If there is a little bit of something that can come out of it that is more than just, I mean, I hope I've written it in a way that I wanted to write it in a way that felt like it was a thriller, but it was a non-fiction book. So hopefully it's a right rattling read. But the point is, all of it, yes, I was on those planes with those people, and none of it needs to happen. None of it needs to happen. If we can just unify some of the regulatory bodies that are around in other parts of the world, if we can just take away some of the need that people feel and educate people so that they're not just going, well, that guy over there is starving, I'll just hire someone with a van with wings to fly him some sandwiches. if we can just educate people a little bit more about why there needs to be a proper structure around these things, then we'll not only end up saving lives, but we will end up stopping an awful lot of bloodshed on the ground in some of the places where these guys fly. You know, a lot of it hasn't needed to happen like it did. A lot of the kind of the conflicts involving small arms, a lot of the blood diamond trade, a lot of it is driven by the absolute invisibility and the absolute naivety around an unlicensed sector.
Well, and the people willing and knowingly dealing with those people.
Absolutely.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Is if you do choose to work with an organisation that is not looking out.
Yeah, and you're part of the problem.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
So it's not just the operators. I mean, I rely on my suppliers for our business to exist, for our industry to exist, and they are fantastic.
Yeah,
they're fantastic at what they do.
Yeah.
But thank you for acknowledging that, and I think it ties in nicely. It's obviously a bit of a strange subject. We do things above board.
Yeah.
But, Outlaws it's a brilliant book.
Thank you.
I urge everyone to buy it because it does have that Hollywood feel to it. Like you said, non-fiction.
Yeah.
But that's what's quite brilliant about the book is it's non-fiction, yet it has that kind of Hollywood script to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, hopefully the film will come out. But in any case, I hope anyone who's reading it takes out of it the sheer scale and depth of the problem. Quite a few good stories in there. Some of them obviously are quite funny on the surface, but like the generator one. But they do illustrate just how much. I mean, I call it in the book the blank spaces of the world, and I don't just mean on a map, but I mean in people's minds, how much they don't imagine could be going on, and there's a fair bit of it. And luckily, we've got people like you and people like all the regulatory bodies that we've got who are just making a kind of safer environment for anyone who does need to transport stuff.
Thank you very much. I think you've blown my trumpet a little bit too much there, but yeah, I'll take it.
We do what we can, don't we?
That just comes down to our initial background story of our lives and mental health and well-being.
Absolutely,
but, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on to Air Chats and having a chat with me today.
No, it'd be a pleasure. Anytime.
So microphones are here. But
nice one. Let's do it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Good stuff.